I thought I'm going to be very original with the name of my presentation and the way how I'm going to actually lead this presentation today, but we already had Erwin today with very interactive presentation. My presentation is also going to be a little bit interactive, but in a different way. So maybe it will be a little bit original. But I also gave title to my presentation, Can Swans Fly? It's a metaphor, but Matthias already was first with his drying rack, so I'm not original here as well. But anyway, I hope you know what I mean by Can Swans Fly? It's some game of words. And actually we are going to talk if our swan, and the swan, the green swan is our Sylius, if it can work in the cloud. And to me, it's always, or almost always, the most difficult part of every presentation, of every workshop I lead, to actually start. And especially at 12 o'clock, because I don't know if I should say good morning, good afternoon, so I will just say hello. And I will start my presentation with some story, just as an icebreaker. It's going to be much easier to give you the same picture which I have in my hand currently. So, in the company I work for, this is a software house called BitBag. Probably you heard about the BitBag. We use Slack for communication, as probably most of you here. And we have a dedicated channel called support. And don't get me wrong, this support channel is not like only for developers, where we have difficulties understanding something about the Sylius code, but it's for everyone. And it's for project managers, for sales representatives, for everyone in the company. So if you have any problems, we just communicate. We can freely ask any questions in this channel. And yeah, I see you, Jacob. So I already told you during the break. You are the one responsible for sparking the idea what I want to talk about. Because something like, I don't remember exactly, something like 1 year ago, you asked me, no, not me, but you popped the question in this support channel. Hey guys, I have some question from customer and I don't know how to answer. This customer asked if Sylius can actually handle 6,000 orders per hour, not per day, per hour. And I remember because I was busy with something and I have alerts for this specific channel. I'm quite active there. And without thinking too much, I was like, yeah, sure, yeah, Sylius can handle that. And I left this thread. I went on some meeting. And after 1 hour or something like this thread was growing and growing. People were asking questions there, and Jacob as well, if I can provide some more context, because I think answering to a customer that, yes, Sylius can handle 6,000 orders per hour is not enough. Please provide me some more context. How? So now I think it's the right time to actually introduce myself. My name is Gracjan. I work for both companies, for Sylius and BitBag. I'm a backend developer, but some of you, I can see some students of mine here. I'm also a creator of Sylius Academy. And I'm also an e-commerce consultant. And what is also important for this presentation, for this story, I also have my own e-commerce store. And actually, because I would like to know who I'm talking to, how many developers we have today in this room? How many of you are developers? Okay, most. So I'm going to speak with developers especially. Okay. Do we also have some business owners? Like some of you have some own e-commerce store? No, no one. So I am the only one. Okay, because for me, like an e-commerce developer without e-commerce store is like mechanic without a car. In my opinion, it's very important to understand the business from both sides. As a developer, but I also understand this business much better because I run my own e-commerce store. And on my daily basis, I work with one of the biggest e-commerce projects written in Sylius, and not only Sylius, but I think it is safe to say that I used to work for top 10. I mean, the projects I was working, and I still work, they are in top 10, the biggest projects written in Sylius. And in my daily work, it is just normal to handle this many orders per hour. For me, it's not a surprise. It's something that I have to think about every day, because that's what my customers expect from me, to know how we can scale Sylius to handle so many orders per hour. But this specific question was raised by some game development studio. And I used to work with automotive, with fashion industry, with pharma, but I was never working for any gaming industry. So it was something completely new. And I thought that to give you some picture, because I was wondering myself, do really games sell so much? Like 6,000 orders is like a lot, and it's normal for pharma. Try to imagine we have subscriptions, for example, and it's quite easy to gather, for example, 500,000 of patients, and they have recurring orders. With automotive, it's also quite popular. I was working for big automotive partners, so it's quite popular to have this many orders per hour. With fashion, of course, we buy clothes every day. It was just obvious. So I decided to do some research about the gaming industry. I had to educate myself because, yeah, Jacob, thank you for sparking this idea. I started digging and I started reading about how much game development studios sell. So let me quickly show you what I have found. We can divide game development studios and games on some segments like AAA, AA, A, and indie. And I was quite surprised because I was reading some websites with interviews with producers of the games, and here are the results. I don't know if you know those games, but for example, Elden Ring, they sold like 12 million copies after the first 18 days after the release, after the initial release. The universe of Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy. I used to play it, I didn't like it, but even though they sold 12 million copies during the first 2 weeks after the release. But Cyberpunk, this is something I used to play, and I don't know if you are so familiar like me. I remember exactly the moment when they released the CD Red project, when they released this game. It was very buggy, and I don't know currently if it was kind of commercial because they got really famous because they had so many bugs. They had some problems with performance. Today it's working quite well, but even though they had so many problems with bugs and performance, even then they sold like 13 million of copies during the first 10 days. Then Zelda, I never played this, but they sold something like 10 million copies during the first 3 days, which is just wow. That's why I was asking if you have some e-commerce owners here. For me, it's like amazing, like this 6,000 of orders, which Jacob asked. I wish to have 6,000 orders per month, which is for me like amazing. But of course, AAA, it's not everything. So I was digging even deeper, and I wanted to know how much do AA games sell. So for example, Lords of Fallen, they sold something like 1 million of copies during the first 10 days, A Way Out, 1 million during the first 2 weeks, Hellblade, and here is not so impressive if we compare it to AAA, 1 million during the first 10 months. Okay, so I think we have some data after my research. So I think now we can count. AAA game development studios, they develop game for something like 4-6 years, depends. For example, GTA 6, for how long is already being in development process, even more. And we must understand that on those games, the development team, it's like 400 people, and they have a budget something like $400 million or even more. And if they won't sell 20 million of copies after release during the first 3 months, it's just a fail. We must understand it. For game development studio, it's going to be fail because they are not going to be able to pay this much for developers and other people involved in the development process. So if we divide those 20 million copies by 90 days, we have something like over 200,000 orders per day. If we divide it even further per day, per hour, then it gives us something like 9,000 orders per hour.
Yep.
And I probably know what you are already thinking. Not all of those copies, not all of those games are going to be sold from the developer store. Because today we have Steam, we have PlayStation Store, we have Xbox. So, okay, fine. Probably 9,000 is way over this. But on the other hand, we must remember and understand that probably the game development studio, they don't have only one game. So, for example, if you have CD Red project, they also have The Witcher 1, Witcher 2, Witcher 3, Cyberpunk, Gwent, and something else. So we must remember that if they are going to release the newest version, now Witcher 4 is coming out soon, then probably Witcher 3 and 2 are going to be sold once again. They are going to be popular because this is how does it work. And I don't know if you remember, but there was this Netflix TV show, a series about The Witcher, and CD Red project, they didn't even expect, but once again, the sales of The Witcher was spiking a lot. Okay, so they have other games, and they also have to sell them. And how about DLCs? Right? Because Cyberpunk has at least one DLC, I know. The Witcher has 2. We have micropayments. We can add some extensions to our game. So in today's business, actually, I never bought anything extra. I bought some DLCs in my past, but I never bought some special edition of Halloween Sword for The Witcher or something like this, but some people do. And okay, so we have some data already. And another thing we have to consider that 9,000 per hour or 6,000 orders per hour, it's not always so linear, right? Because we have spikes. We have the moments when we have high traffic on our website, on our e-commerce shop. Sometimes we have low traffic. So this specific question raised by Jacob, I think it was actually asked by business analytics. They know what they are talking about. So I think there is a reason why this specific 6,000 orders per hour was the case. So I can confirm that, okay, it was surprising for me that the game industry can sell so much. But like I said, in automotive, in pharma, it's just normal. So I totally believe and I can confirm to you that this much of traffic, so many orders is just normal. We have to think about it as developers and we have to be ready for this. So what we are going to talk about today, I would like to talk what are the differences between the traditional server and the cloud. And just to be on the same page, during the break, the cigarette break, I met some guys from the platform message, or actually they just changed the name. So I already spoke with them. Are you here, guys? Hello. So I already told them that I'm going to talk about a specific cloud provider, which is going to be AWS, but it's not going to be any advertisement for AWS, and they didn't pay me to say anything about that, but if someone from AWS can hear that, if you want to pay me, I will issue some invoice, so don't worry about that. But actually, why am I'm going to talk about AWS? The reason is simple. During the last 4 years, I just used to work a lot with AWS, and I got, we can call it promotion, and I got promoted to not maybe DevOps, but it's called Infra Champion. And for the last 4 years, I'm just heavily busy with scaling, with understanding, with learning how AWS work. So, as a developer, as a consultant, very often I hear questions, like the Jacob's one. If Sylius can handle thousands of orders, if our database can something, if we can handle this and this much traffic. So I gathered this everything, the most frequently asked questions, and I'm going to share everything what I have learned, and I will just try to explain what people keep on asking me, because it might be not so obvious, but it's hard actually to get answers to these questions. So I will explain you what kind of problems stakeholders, business owners, developers, they have to face every day with scaling e-commerce so high. So we are going to start with the database. So this is our first bottleneck. So the first question that I quite often hear is like, our e-commerce store is already there for something like 4 years, 5 years, and we already have something like 600 million customers registered in our store. We have something like 500 million orders in the database already. We have 16 million products because some of them are outdated and so on and so on. So quite often I hear, and the answer is not so obvious, how much our database can handle before we have to think about doing something with the database, before we have to think about partitioning and so on and so on. So probably you heard about vertical and horizontal scaling, but usually it is the case for our servers, for our containers. But with the database, it's actually a very similar story, and those who used to know that we can scale database vertically, but also horizontally, then you are the lucky ones, because not everyone knows that. So let's start with vertically, with scaling our database vertically. So we can scale our database vertically in both solutions, so on standard servers, but also on the cloud solutions. So what does it mean, scaling vertically? It means adding more and more resources to our database instance. And in case of AWS, it is possible to assign 64 terabytes of storage, 1.5 terabyte of RAM, and something like 196 CPUs. So the answer is, we can fit something like between 60 and 70 billion rows into our database. So my answer is always the same. You don't have to worry about the capacity of your database, at least not soon. The only difference and huge advantage of cloud solution is that we can do it gradually. So we can start with very small instance, and we can set some kind of alarm. Once our database is hitting the limit of the capacity, we can gracefully add resources to our database instance. So this is the first advantage. It's very, very easy to scale our database vertically. But that's easy and also possible with standard server solution. But let's talk about scaling our database horizontally. So try to imagine that instead of having only one database, we can have unlimited number of replicas. And how does it work? Let's say that this client here, it's our Sylius instance, and whenever it performs a write operation, so for example, we have new customer registered in our store, we have new order placed, this is write operation, right? Because we add something to the database. So once our client detects this is write operation, we are going to communicate with the primary database. But any other read operation, so for example, we want to see list of products, we want to browse the history of our orders, we are going to communicate with the replica. But it also depends, because client can also read from the primary. It depends on the traffic. If currently our primary database it's not heavily loaded, then our client can still talk to primary database. And we can have unlimited number of replicas. And try to imagine that our client, our Sylius application, for example, is not the only one client of our database. Just think that today's modern e-commerce solutions, they have plenty of microservices as well. So for example, we might have some Elasticsearch integration, and try to imagine this Elasticsearch has to be indexed every couple of hours or even couple of times per hour. So try to imagine you have 16 million of products, and it has to iterate over all of them and build indexes. And try to imagine it's going to happen during the rush hours, during the heavy traffic in our store. So yeah, we can use all those microservices, all those integration to talk only with our replicas. And how many of you actually, you can raise the hand, I'm going to be the first one who is going to raise the hand. How many times in your developer career, how many times did you kill database in production? Don't be so shy. It's nothing bad. I did it 2 weeks ago. Because accidentally, I added some migration, the Symfony migration using Doctrine. I added some index to the table which had 60 million rows. And you know, nothing happened. You know why? Because AWS quickly detected that our primary database got killed, and it quickly switched one of the replicas to be the primary database. So we had downtime like a couple of minutes. So try to imagine if one of the replicas, one of the primary or the primary database is going to fail. We have plenty of copies, so we can still keep our application alive even though we killed the primary database. And yeah, it happened to me not only once. And it gives us a huge confidence if we have not only one database, but we have more. Of course, we also have snapshots, but believe me, recovering your database from snapshot is not a good idea. We still have a huge downtime there. So having multiple databases means that we are safe in every way. But the question is, can Swans fly? So can our application written in Sylius, can it work with multiple database instances? The answer is yes, because Sylius is built on Symfony, and in Symfony, our default database library for connection is Doctrine. And as you can see on this slide, it's only a little bit of configuration. As you can see here, we have the main connection, but we can add as many replicas as we want. And the Doctrine is going to be smart enough to talk to all of them. Also, from inside of the code, here is the code snippet below. Inside of the code, we can also check if the connection is primary read replica connection, and then we can use ensure connected to primary or ensure connected to replica. So we have full control over what we are doing with our application and database connections. So, okay, it was everything about the database. The next step is the application itself. So here we have very similar situation like with the database. We can scale it horizontally or we can scale it vertically. But try to imagine, when we have standard old-fashioned server, then we have only one instance. And of course, we can add more and more and more resources to our database, to our server. But try to imagine that instead of having only one instance, we can have as many as we want. So try to imagine that during the rush hours, we can have 16 instances of our Sylius application, which is going to be Dockerized. And when we don't need them anymore, because it's nighttime and we have much lower traffic, we can just simply disable them. And we can set, of course, auto-scaling groups, which is going to help us with this. Also, it is the same case for the workers, because try to imagine how many asynchronous jobs our application has to perform every day. We have Messenger, so for example, we dispatch messages to be processed later, and other processes like cron jobs, and try to imagine that some specific instances of our Sylius application are going to handle only asynchronous jobs. Meanwhile, HTTP traffic is going to be balanced only to those specific ones. So we can divide our traffic. And here we have the exactly same case like with the database. So if some of them are going to fail, so for example, something really terrible happened with this instance of our Sylius application, then our load balancer is going to redirect traffic to other that are still healthy and still working. And this is something I just before the presentation, something I said to Damian, that I have to admit that AWS is much more expensive than standard single old-fashioned server. But try to imagine, if you sell 6,000 orders per hour and your application is going to be up for the 99% of the time, it means, and this is something that every DevOps has to learn, it means that our application is going to be down for 3 days, 15 hours, and 36 minutes, which gives us 500,000 orders that are not going to be placed because our application is down. Of course, all the server providers, they have different SLAs. So even if your application is going to be up for 99.9% of the time, it's still like 8 hours and 45 minutes when it's not going to be able to receive traffic, which still gives something like 54,000 of orders, which we are going probably, because some customers are loyal and they are going to retry, but it's still possible that we are not going to receive something like 54,000 of orders. So whenever we talk about money, you must just believe me that such a huge companies, they don't care if it's going to be so much more expensive than standard server, because it's still going to be cheaper anyway. Right. And the question here is once again, like with the database, can Swans Fly? Can we actually deploy multiple containers, multiple instances of Sylius? Yes, and even if you go right now to the GitHub Sylius standard repository, it's going to be served already with Docker Compose, with Docker configuration, which don't get me wrong, it's not going to be production ready, but it already indicates that Sylius does feel in the containers in the Docker like home. And it's quite easy to actually make it work in production on AWS ECS, for example. Okay, let's think further. Whenever we talk about such a huge companies, it's quite impossible to sell 6,000 orders per hour in one country or only. So every project, every huge project I used to work with, they sell on almost whole world. So we might have customers from Spain, from Lyon, from Australia, Sydney, New York, and so on and so on. And here, the biggest problem, and this is something that Erwin touched a little bit before, is the latency, right? So try to imagine that all our files are stored in one place, for example, in Paris, but we have some customers that are trying to reach our application from Sydney. So in AWS and other cloud providers, we can use something like S3 and CloudFront. And how does it work? We can still keep our data in the one place, so still, for example, in Paris. But if someone from Sydney is going to request it for the first time, then this data is going to be cached in the server in Sydney. So whenever another person is going to ask for the same file, it's going to be already cached in Sydney, and it's going to be much easier to fetch this data. And try to imagine, in case of e-commerce store which sells games, try to imagine if 6,000 people are going to buy our game, they also are going to download it. And like in case of Cyberpunk, it's quite heavy. It's like 130 gigabytes. And try to imagine that 6,000 people in the parallel are going to download our game. If you know any server that is going to handle such a huge traffic, then let me know. But I think it's quite difficult. So AWS offers us solutions like S3 plus CloudFront, which actually it's not even going to affect our server capacity performance. And it's not only about huge files, because try to imagine we have also images. Before any customer is going to buy the game, then probably they want to read some opinions, they want to watch some movies. So this everything has to transfer some data, right? And here we have another question, same like with the database, same like with containers. Can Swans fly? Yes, because Sylius developers, I think they are very smart because they use abstraction and interface for everything. We use Webpack for assets. We use lib-imaging bundle for images, and everywhere we use file system interface instead of real implementation, which means we can use adapters. With just a couple lines of code, configuration, not even code, we can make lib-imaging bundle to work with S3 and CloudFront, and it's almost working out of the box. And if we follow the Sylius good practices and we use file system interface everywhere, then our application is going to work flawlessly with solutions like S3 and CloudFront. Okay, let me quickly check. We still have 10 minutes. So, my customers quite often also ask me about the security. Because try to imagine, whenever we sell so much, whenever we have so much sensitive data about our customers, they are very concerned about the security. So try to imagine when we have normal, standard, old-fashioned server, then it's always exposed to the internet. In case of AWS or any other cloud solution, we can just encapsulate it inside of the private subnet, the VPC. So whenever we want to talk with our Redis, with our Elasticsearch, with our database, it doesn't even have to be exposed to the internet. We only expose our load balancer CloudFront to the internet, but whenever our application Sylius is going to talk with the database, they connect between each other internally. So we can easily increase the security of our application. And try to imagine about handling such a big infrastructure. Because why do we actually have GitHub whenever we work on Sylius application or any other application? Because otherwise it will be quite impossible to manage it, right? We open pull requests, it has to go through code review. Once everything is okay, then it's being merged to the production. And try to imagine that we have standard server and we have one magic administrator which has all the knowledge about our infrastructure, and this person is going to quit our company without actually conveying the knowledge about how this infrastructure works. With solutions like AWS, it's natively supporting IAC, so infrastructure as a code. So this means we can use CloudFormation, we can use Terraform in order to describe how our infrastructure is going to look. And that's why I was also asking how many developers we have here, because I don't know if this is the case only for me, but I think Sylius is getting more and more popular, and bigger companies are just running on Sylius. And in my opinion, sooner or later, you are going to be involved in projects that use cloud solution. And I will tell you how does it work in big companies. You cannot count on administrators. You just need to be able to create new resources on your infrastructure. For example, whenever you need to add new S3 bucket, whenever you need to add new queue, SQS queue, for example, you need to know how to do it yourself. So with this approach, we have one GitHub repository when developers can open pull requests. Then, of course, it has to go through the DevOps code review, but everyone in the company can be responsible for creating the infrastructure, and there are no secrets. There is no one magic administrator which has all the knowledge about how does it work. And this is actually the last one, which I would like to share with you, but I have also some surprise at the end for you. Quite often, my customers ask me, hey, it's quite dangerous if we implement some new feature. What if it's not going to work, or what if it's not going to work as we expect? Can we in Sylius perform A/B testing? And my answer is always the same. Yes, we can, but actually Sylius is not the right place to implement A/B testing. So try to imagine. When I said before, we can have, for example, 16 instances of our Sylius application, then try to imagine that we deploy only the new feature, the V2 branch, for example, only to 10% of our containers. And load balancer is going to redirect, for example, people from Sydney only to the new feature. And we can easily and in safe manner test our new feature. And in case something goes wrong, we can just revert it, we can roll it back, and we can ask our load balancer to redirect traffic to the other still working containers, to the V1. So this is also possible to handle it in the cloud. Okay, and I also have summary, but before we come back to summary, I would also like I said in the very beginning, I would like to make this presentation interactive, but not like you, Erwin, did it. You might know the Sylius Academy, so you can go to academy.sylius.com, and there you can find my courses. So for example, there is a Sylius Practical Mastery course, but recently I added new course, which is called Can Swans Fly? And I decided that this course is going to be free, because as a Sylius teacher, it was quite difficult for me to learn, to understand how cloud solutions work. And I have to be honest with you guys now, that I'm not a DevOps master. I'm still not proficient with AWS. This is something I used to work for 4 years, like I said already, but I still think there is plenty and plenty to learn from my side. So I decided I'm going to share my journey with you. So if you want, you can join me. And I'm going to release, I cannot promise if it's going to be one video, one tutorial per week or more, but I'm going to create a repository. I'm going to create a blueprint of application, Sylius application together with Terraform code. And I want you all to be able to understand and deploy Sylius application on AWS on yourself. I just want to spread the knowledge. I want you all to be I want you to feel safe that you know what you are doing. So, like I said, probably it is quite possible that you are going to join some project which is on AWS, and I just want you to understand it because I spent many years learning that, and I would like to make it much more easier for you. So probably you can take some shortcut and do it much, much easier. So this video, this first video was uploaded yesterday, and it's still private, but after this presentation, I'm going to make it free and available for all of you for free. So this is something from me, and that's what I meant by making this presentation interactive. So if you want, feel free to join me in this journey. Okay, and here's the summary. And I really like this graph, this schema, because look how actually Sylius is created. It's composed from components, bundles, core, and interfaces, and it already looks like the cloud solution. So it's not one huge monolith, but it can be spread. And what is cool about Sylius, doesn't matter if you choose using the headless, if you are going to use API, if you are going to use monolith, you can do everything with Sylius. You can deploy it on standard server, and it's going to work just fine. You can deploy it on AWS from the day one, and it's going to work. And you can choose your hybrid mode. So, for example, at some point you might decide that, hey, having multiple database replicas, it's something for us because our database is a bottleneck. So Sylius is going to work with that out of the box. At some point you might decide, hey, this idea with having S3 store and CloudFront, this is something for us because we have many customers over the world, and actually latency is our biggest problem with our application. With Sylius, you can do that. So, yeah, swans can fly. This is my opinion. Still, not many people know how to do it. So probably I'm one of the first ones that used to work with such a huge Sylius project. So this is something I would like to share with you. So join me in my adventure, and that's everything what I wanted to tell you today.